No one wanted the grandfather's abandoned house until the grandson discovered what was inside. The tension in the attorney's office was palpable as the Mitchell family awaited the reading of the will. When it came to the part about the rural property in Riverside, the silence was broken only by the uninterested sighs of the relatives present. It was then that Tyler Mitchell, just 28 years old, surprised everyone by raising a trembling hand. The young man, always seen as the family dreamer, the one who could never settle into any job, was asking to keep the house nobody wanted. "Are you sure, my boy?" asked his aunt, Mrs. Barbara, her tone a mix of pity and disbelief. "That house has been falling apart for over 10 years. "I'm sure," replied Tyler, feeling the weight of the judgmental stares from his cousins and uncles. "Someone needs to take care of what's left of Grandpa Howard." The eldest cousin, Brandon, let out a bitter laugh. "Take care of what, Tyler?" "That leaky shack. You'll spend more money fixing it than it's worth." "He's always been a bit of a space cadet," murmured Cousin Jennifer to her sister, not caring if Tyler heard. "At least this way we don't have to worry about that property." The attorney, Harold Stevens, adjusted his glasses and looked at Tyler with a paternal expression. "Young man, I need to be frank with you. I visited the property last month for the inventory. The house is in a precarious state. No running water, the electricity was cut off years ago, and the roof structure is compromised. Do you have the resources for such an extensive renovation?" Tyler swallowed hard. His savings as an office assistant barely covered the rent for his small apartment, but something inside him, an intuition he couldn't explain, told him he had to accept this inheritance. "I'll figure it out," he replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Very well," sighed Attorney Stevens, making some notes. "I'll prepare the documentation, but I recommend you visit the property first before making a final decision." 2 weeks later, Tyler was driving his old station wagon down the dirt road leading to his grandfather's property. His phone's GPS had stopped working miles back, forcing him to rely on sparse memories from the few times he'd visited the place as a child. When he finally spotted the house, his heart sank. The wooden structure, once painted light blue, now showed the grayish color of wood exposed to the elements. The red-tiled roof had several collapsed sections, creating holes where wild plants grew. The windows, once protected by the floral curtains his grandmother Dorothy used to sew, were now just empty frames letting the wind blow freely through. Tyler got out of the car and walked slowly toward the porch. The floorboards groaned under his feet, some giving way dangerously. The front door, made of solid wood, had withstood the weather better but was swollen and stuck. "Grandpa," he murmured to himself, pushing the door with his shoulder until it opened. "What would you do in my place?" The inside of the house was even worse than the outside. Furniture covered in dusty sheets created ghostly shapes in the dim light. The smell of mold and damp wood was almost suffocating. Tyler stepped carefully, testing each floorboard before shifting his weight completely. In the main room, where his grandfather's sofa used to be, the one where he would read old newspapers, there was now only dust and some loose boards. Tyler remembered how, on the rare family visits, Howard Mitchell always seemed distant, answering relatives' attempts at conversation with monosyllables. "He was always a bit odd," his mother would say. "Very reserved. You know how it is." After Dorothy passed, he became even more withdrawn. Tyler headed toward the bedrooms. The master bedroom, where his grandparents had slept, was completely flooded due to a hole in the roof. The double bed, once the pride of the house, was now just a rusty iron frame and a rotten mattress. In the second bedroom, smaller and better preserved, Tyler found something that made him stop. A small wooden desk, miraculously intact, still had some papers on it. He approached with curiosity and found old bills, notes in tiny handwriting, and beneath it all a photograph. In the image, yellowed with time, his grandfather appeared smiling next to a group of people Tyler didn't recognize. They were simple men and women, some holding tools, others with children in their arms. Everyone seemed genuinely happy. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "Thank you for everything, Mr. Howard. The Lawson family, 1987. "The Lawson family?" Tyler murmured, trying to remember if he had heard that name before. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. He put the photograph in his pocket and continued exploring. The kitchen, surprisingly, was in better condition than the rest of the house. The solid wood cabinets had withstood time well, and the wood-burning stove, though covered in rust, seemed salvageable. It was while examining the stove that Tyler noticed something strange. One of the stones in the wall behind the stove seemed loose. Curious, he tried to move it and found it came out easily, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside the niche, he found a brown envelope sealed with red wax. His hands trembled as he broke the seal. Inside was an old key and a note written in his grandfather's careful handwriting. To whoever finds this, the key opens what truly matters. Seek where the books keep secrets. Tyler looked around, confused. What books? The house had no library, at least not that he remembered. He decided to explore each room more systematically, searching for anything that might relate to books. In what was once his grandfather's office, he found a wooden bookcase against the wall. Most of the shelves were empty, but a few still held old volumes, mainly technical manuals and some popular novels from the 1970s. While examining the books, Tyler noticed that one of them, a thick volume about agriculture, seemed different from the others. When he pulled it, he heard a mechanical click, and the entire bookcase moved slightly forward, revealing itself to be a secret door. Tyler's heart raced. Carefully, he pulled the bookcase aside, revealing a small hidden room. The space was dark and stuffy, but less deteriorated than the rest of the house. A single small window, covered by a thick curtain, let in a beam of golden light. In the center of the room was a simple table and 2 chairs. On the walls, makeshift shelves held hundreds of envelopes organized by color and size. Some were tied with ribbon, others loose. They all appeared to be letters. Tyler picked up the nearest envelope with trembling hands. It was addressed to Mr. Howard Mitchell, and the return address read, "The Thompson Family, Hillside District." He opened it carefully and began to read, "Dear Mr. Howard, we have no words to thank you for everything you did for our family. Thanks to the money you lent us, we were able to buy the medicine for Robert, and he is recovering well. Mrs. Susan started selling the sweets at the market as you suggested, and is already earning a good income. We promise we will repay every cent as soon as possible, but we wanted you to know that you saved our family. With all our affection and gratitude, Thompson Family." Tyler reread the letter 3 times, trying to process the information. His grandfather loaned money to people. That man the family always described as stingy and lonely. He picked up another envelope, this one from the Lawson family, the same name as on the photograph he had found. The letter was even more moving. "Mr. Howard, you changed our lives forever. With the money you gave us, we were able to renovate our house before Emily Rose was born. More importantly, you taught us how to budget our money. Today we already have a small savings put aside, and we are helping other families just as you helped us. You didn't just give us fish, you taught us how to fish. Eternally grateful, Robert and Susan Lawson." Tyler's hands trembled as he picked up letter after letter. Each one told a different story, but they all had something in common: deep gratitude for someone who had helped them not just with money, but with advice, guidance, and, most importantly, with dignity. A letter from the Patterson family mentioned how his grandfather had helped them get construction jobs. Another, from the Anderson family, thanked him for teaching their eldest daughter to read and write. Their third, from the Williams family, recounted how he had mediated a years-long feud between neighbors. Tyler spent hours reading. There were letters from different decades, some yellowed with age, others more recent. The oldest he found was from 1962, a few years after his grandparents' wedding. The most recent was from just 2 years ago, shortly before the old man's passing. In one of the most touching letters, a woman named Lucy wrote, "Mr. Howard, today marks exactly 10 years since you helped us when we lost everything in the fire. I wanted you to know that our Patricia graduated as a nurse this year, and she was the first in our family to go to college. She always says she wants to help people the way you helped us. You planted a seed of kindness that is sprouting in many hearts." When he finally finished reading all the letters he could, Tyler was emotionally exhausted. He sat down in one of the chairs and tried to process everything he had discovered. The grandfather he had known was completely different from the man described in those letters. To his family, Howard Mitchell was a closed-off, difficult man who barely spoke at family gatherings. To those dozens of families, he was a guardian angel, someone who appeared in the most difficult moments with help that went far beyond money. The sun was setting when Tyler finally decided to stop for the day. He carefully locked the secret room and returned to the station wagon, but he couldn't stop thinking about the letters. The entire drive back home, the words of gratitude echoed in his mind. That night in his small apartment, Tyler couldn't sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how his grandfather had managed to keep that double life for so many decades. How did he get the money to help so many people? Why did he never say anything about it to the family? The next day, Tyler decided to look for some of the people mentioned in the letters. He started with the Lawson family, who in the photograph seemed close to his grandfather. Following the address mentioned in one of the more recent letters, he arrived at a small house in the Mill district of Riverside. The place was simple, but well kept, with a flower garden in front and a small auto repair shop next door. When he knocked, he was greeted by a man around 60, sturdy with hands marked by work. "Good afternoon," said Tyler nervously. "Are you Robert Lawson?" "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" "My name is Tyler Mitchell. I'm Howard Mitchell's grandson." Robert's expression changed completely. His eyes filled with tears, and he broke into an emotional smile. "Oh my goodness. You're Mr. Howard's grandson? Come in, come in. Susan. Susan, come here quick." A woman of the same age appeared, drying her hands on her apron, and when Robert explained who Tyler was, she also got emotional. "Oh, my dear," said Susan, giving Tyler a hug as if he were a beloved relative. "Your grandfather was an angel in our lives, a true angel." Sitting in the simple but cozy living room, Robert and Susan told their story. In the 1980s, they had 3 small children, and Robert had lost his job at the factory, where he had worked for 15 years. With no money for rent and the children going hungry, they didn't know what to do anymore. "That's when your grandfather showed up," Robert recounted, his eyes shining. "No one in the neighborhood really knew who he was, only that he came from time to time to visit an elderly lady here in the district. One day he saw me trying to fix my bicycle on the street and offered to help. He had an incredible skill with tools," Carmen added, and while they fixed the bicycle, they started talking. Robert ended up pouring out about our situation. "The next day," Robert continued, "he came back with a proposal. He said he had some money saved and wanted to lend it to us, so I could buy some tools and start a small bicycle repair shop right here at home." Susan got up and brought a box of old photos. "Look here," she said, showing several photos where Howard appeared, helping Robert set up the small workshop, teaching repair techniques, talking with the children. "But he didn't just give us the money," Robert explained. "He taught us how to manage it, how to save a portion of the earnings, how to treat customers well. Even more importantly, he taught us to have dignity in our work. And the best part," added Susan, smiling, "is that when we finally managed to save up the money to repay the loan, he said he would only accept it if we promised to use the same amount to help another family in need." Tyler was impressed with the story, but one doubt bothered him. "Did you know of other people my grandfather helped?" Robert and Susan exchanged glances. "We knew of a few," Robert admitted. "But your grandfather was very discreet. He insisted that each family keep the help a secret. He said people's dignity was more important than anything. But over time," added Susan, "we ended up finding out. Mrs. Lucy from the bakery, Mr. Michael from the barber shop, the Williams family. A lot of people around here had a story similar to ours." Tyler spent the rest of the afternoon listening to stories about his grandfather. Robert showed how the small workshop had grown over the years, now employing 2 workers. Susan talked about how 3 of their children graduated from college, something unthinkable when they were struggling. "Your grandfather always said," Susan commented at the end of the visit, "that money only has value when it circulates and does good, that there's no point in hoarding a fortune if there are people who need a little help to start over." As Tyler prepared to leave, Robert held him by the arm. "My dear, I need to tell you something important. A few years ago, when your grandfather was already quite elderly, he stopped visiting us. We thought he might be sick or something." But later we discovered he was passing on the responsibility to other people. How so? Asked Tyler. He was teaching some of us who had already completely recovered to identify and help other families. He said the work was too big for one person alone and that he was getting old. Susan nodded. He created a kind of network. The families who had received help and were already doing well started contributing to a common fund. Your grandfather just coordinated everything. Does this fund still exist? Asked Tyler, intrigued. Yes, it does, Robert replied. Actually, we have a meeting every first Sunday of the month. The group gathers at Mrs. Lucy's house to decide how to use the money we manage to collect. It's not much, but it's always enough to help one family or another. But ever since your grandfather passed, Carmen added sadly, we've been a bit lost. He had a special way of identifying who really needed help and how to help them in the best way possible. Tyler left the Lawson family's home with his mind buzzing with ideas. His grandfather hadn't just helped people individually, he had created an entire mutual support network that kept functioning even after his passing. In the following days, Tyler visited other families mentioned in the letters. Each conversation revealed a new facet of his grandfather's work. The Patterson family told how he had helped them secure financing to buy their own home. The Anderson family explained how he had mediated a labor dispute that was ruining the family's father. Mrs. Lucy, who had mentioned her nurse daughter in her letter, welcomed Tyler with special affection. She was a grey-haired lady with a warm smile who lived in a small bakery she ran herself. Your grandfather, she said, serving a hot cup of coffee, was a man ahead of his time. He understood that true charity isn't about giving handouts, it's about giving opportunity. How did you meet? Asked Tyler. Oh, my dear, it was during a very difficult time in my life. My husband had left me with 3 young daughters and I had no profession. I was trying to sell sweets on the street to earn some money, but I barely knew how to calculate the price to make a profit. Mrs. Lucy took him to the bakery's kitchen, where several women were working preparing bread and sweets. Your grandfather found me crying in the square because I had sold sweets all day and at the end discovered I had lost money. He sat by my side and with great patience taught me how to calculate costs, profit, how to price the products. But he didn't stop there, she continued, pointing to the bakery equipment. He lent me money to rent a small place, introduced me to a flour supplier who gave discounts for larger purchases, and even helped me decorate the place. One of the employees, a young woman of about 30, approached. This is Patricia, said Mrs. Lucy proudly. The daughter who became a nurse, remember from the letter? Patricia smiled timidly. Your grandfather paid for my school supplies all through high school, she shared. But he always said I had to pay it back by helping other people study too. Today, besides working at the hospital, I give free tutoring to underprivileged children in the district. Tyler was impressed by the continuity of his grandfather's work through the people he had helped. It was as if every seed of kindness he had planted was germinating and producing new fruit. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. Mrs. Lucy, said Tyler, Robert Lawson told me you still meet every month to decide how to help other people. Is that true? Yes, it is, my dear. Every first Sunday of the month, right here at the bakery. There are about 15 families that your grandfather helped over the years. Each one contributes what they can, and together we manage to help at least one family per month. And how do you choose who to help? Ah, that's the hard part, sighed Mrs. Lucy. Your grandfather had a special gift for that. He could identify not only who was in need, but especially who was truly willing to make an effort to improve their life. Patricia agreed. He used to say it was no use helping someone who didn't want to change. That money alone solved nothing if the person wasn't willing to learn and work. But it also couldn't be someone who just needed a little push, added Mrs. Lucy. It had to be someone in a truly difficult situation, but with the willpower to start over. Tyler was beginning to understand the complexity of the work his grandfather had developed. It wasn't just about giving money, it was an entire process of identification, analysis, guidance, and follow-up. "Would you like me to participate in one of these meetings?" he asked, surprising himself with his own question. Mrs. Lucy smiled, moved. "My son, it would be an honor. Your grandfather always said that one day someone in the family would understand his work. It seems the time has come." The following Sunday, Tyler arrived at Mrs. Lucy's bakery at 9 in the morning. Several people were already waiting. Some he recognized from the photos found in his grandfather's house, others completely unknown. Robert Lawson was there with his wife Susan, as well as several other families Tyler had visited during the week. The atmosphere was relaxed and familiar, more like a gathering of friends than a formal assembly. "Everyone," announced Mrs. Lucy, "this is Tyler, Mr. Howard's grandson. He discovered the letters we kept in the house and is interested in learning about our work." Everyone greeted him warmly, and Tyler sat in one of the chairs arranged in a circle. "Well, let's begin," said a man Tyler didn't know. "I'm Michael, from the barber shop. Last week we had the follow-up meeting with the Davis family, whom we helped last month. Want to tell us, Robert?" Robert Lawson stood up. "The situation has improved a lot. Roger got the job at the auto shop we recommended, and Sylvia started selling snacks at the children's school. They've already paid back half of what we loaned for the rent, and they said by the end of the month they can settle it all." "And the guidance part?" asked a lady Tyler didn't know. "Oh, that's going very well," smiled Susan. "Sylvia was learning to manage money properly. She even managed to set aside a tiny amount for emergencies, just as Mr. Howard always taught." Michael made some notes in a simple notebook. "Great. So we can consider the Davis case is heading toward a positive conclusion. Any new referrals for this month?" A young woman who had been quiet until then raised her hand. "I have a referral," she said timidly. "There's a neighbor of mine, Mrs. Teresa. She was widowed 2 months ago and is having great difficulty keeping the house. She has 2 small children and no profession." Michael wrote down the name. "Does anyone know this family?" Mrs. Lucy nodded. "Yes, I do. Teresa buys bread here from time to time. She's a very hard-working person, but she really ended up in a difficult situation when she lost her husband." "Then let's follow Mr. Howard's protocol," said Robert. 2 people will do the assessment visit, another 2 will check references in the neighborhood, and then we decide the best way to help." Tyler watched everything, impressed. These people had created an organized and efficient system, following principles his grandfather had established over decades. "If I may," said Tyler, raising his hand, "I would like to participate in the assessment visits." The group exchanged glances, smiling. "It would be an honor for us," said Michael. "Your grandfather always said family was important for understanding a person's character." In the following days, Tyler accompanied Susan and Mrs. Lucy on the visit to Mrs. Teresa's family. The woman, about 40 years old, lived in a small rented house in the Hillside district, the same area where the Thompson family had written one of the letters Tyler had found. Mrs. Teresa received them with initial suspicion, but when Susan explained that they knew people who could help her find work, she opened up completely. "I know how to clean. I know how to cook. I know how to take care of children," she told them, her eyes red from crying. "But with my 2 young sons, it's hard to find a job that lets me pick them up from school." The house was simple, but very clean and organized. The 2 boys, about 7 and 9 years old, were doing homework at a makeshift little table in the living room. "Are you good students?" Mrs. Lucy asked the children. "Yes, ma'am," answered the older one. "My mother always says that studying is the only way for us to have a better life." Susan and Mrs. Lucy exchanged a look, smiling. That attitude of the mother towards her children's education was exactly the kind of thing old Howard valued. During the conversation, they discovered that Mrs. Teresa had experience in hospital cleaning, a valued and well-paid skill. The problem was that the hospitals in the area didn't offer schedules compatible with childcare. "What if we found someone to take care of the boys during the hours you'd be working?" asked Susan. Mrs. Teresa's eyes lit up. "Would that be possible?" "Let's see what we can do," said Mrs. Lucy, jotting down some information. Back at the bakery, Tyler joined the discussion on how to best help Mrs. Teresa's family. The group decided that the ideal would be to get her a job at one of the city's hospitals and simultaneously arrange for a trustworthy person to care for the children after school. "Patricia," Mrs. Lucy said to the former beneficiary, who was now a nurse, "Don't you know someone at the hospital who could help us with a position for Mrs. Teresa?" "Yes, I do. My supervisor is always complaining about how hard it is to find good cleaning staff. If Teresa has experience and references, I'm sure we can get her a spot." "And for childcare," suggested Susan. "How about Mrs. Dorothy? She's retired, lives alone and loves children. I'm sure she'd agree to look after the boys for a fair price." Within a week, everything was arranged. Mrs. Teresa got the job at the hospital, Mrs. Dorothy agreed to care for the children, and the group loaned the money necessary for Mrs. Teresa to buy uniforms and pay the first month for the caregiver. Tyler was impressed by the efficiency of the system. It wasn't just a matter of giving money, but of creating a network of solutions that allowed people to rebuild their lives in a sustainable way. 2 weeks later, during the follow-up meeting, Mrs. Teresa appeared in person to give thanks. "I don't know how to repay all you've done for me," she said, with tears in her eyes. "I got the job, my sons are being well cared for, and for the first time in months I've been able to sleep peacefully." "The best way to repay," said Robert Lawson, repeating the words he had heard from old Howard decades ago, "is to help another person when you are well established yourself." Mrs. Teresa nodded emphatically. "You can be sure I'll do that. In fact, I already know of a family that needs help." And so the cycle continued. Tyler was becoming more and more involved with the group's work. He attended all the meetings, helped with the assessment visits, and contributed financially within his means. But a restlessness was growing in his heart. He felt he could be doing more. It was during a conversation with Michael, the barber, that an idea began to form in his mind. "Michael," he said, "you always meet here at Mrs. Lucy's bakery, right?" "Yes, we do. Why?" "I was thinking, what if we had a bigger, more organized place? A dedicated space for meetings, for giving financial guidance, for teaching professional skills." Michael stopped cutting the client's hair and looked at Tyler with interest. "That's an interesting idea, but a place like that would be expensive and our fund isn't big enough." "What if it was at my grandfather's house?" Michael's eyes widened. "At Mr. Howard's house? But isn't it in ruins?" "It is, but I inherited the property. If we can renovate part of the house, we could use it as a space for the social work." The idea excited Michael, who suggested that Tyler present the proposal at the group's next meeting. The following Sunday, when Tyler laid out his idea, the reaction was enthusiastic. Mrs. Lucy clapped her hands, Robert Lawson smiled with emotion, and even the newer members of the group seemed excited. "It would be like a natural continuation of your grandfather's work," commented Susan, "using his very own house as a base to help people." "But what about the renovation costs?" asked one of the women. "I have some savings," said Tyler, "and come to think of it, several people here have skills that could help. Robert is a mechanic, but he understands construction. Michael has experience with electrical installations. Mrs. Lucy knows suppliers who can give special prices. And I can help with the legal aspects," offered a man Tyler didn't know well. "I'm an accountant. I was helped by your grandfather about 10 years ago. I can handle the bureaucratic part of getting the space regularized." The excitement was contagious, but Mrs. Lucy, always prudent, raised an important point. "My children, the idea is wonderful, but we need to be realistic. The house is very deteriorated, and a complete renovation would cost a fortune." Tyler had already thought about that. "We don't need to renovate the whole house at once. We can start with the secret room where I found the letters, and 1 or 2 more rooms, enough to have a meeting space and a small office." Robert Lawson, who had visited the property the previous week at Tyler's request, confirmed the proposal's feasibility. "It is possible. The structure of the house is in bad shape, but the back part where the secret room is more preserved. With about 3 months of work and a moderate investment, we can get it into usable condition." The group decided to form a committee to study the project in detail. Tyler was put in charge of the legal aspects of the property, Robert and Michael for the technical part of the renovation, and Mrs. Lucy for overall coordination. During the next 2 weeks, they met several times at the property, measuring spaces, assessing needs, and calculating costs. With each visit, Tyler felt more connected to his grandfather's memory. It was during one of these visits that something happened that would completely change the course of the project. Robert was examining the house's electrical installation when he noticed that some wires seemed newer than others. Intrigued, he followed the path of the wires and discovered they led to a small shed at the back of the property, which none of them had explored yet. "Tyler, come see this," he called. The shed, built of wood like the rest of the property, was locked with a sturdy padlock. Tyler remembered the key he had found along with the note in the kitchen. "Could this be the key?" he murmured, taking it from his pocket. The key fit perfectly. When they opened the door, they were speechless. The shed had been transformed into a complete workshop, with organized workbenches, tools of all kinds carefully arranged, and shelves with construction, electrical, and mechanical materials. Everything was clean and in perfect condition. "My God," whispered Michael, examining a set of professional electrical tools, "this is worth a fortune." But the biggest surprise was in a small makeshift office inside the shed. At a simple table, they found notebooks with detailed lists of people who had been helped, notes on vocational teaching techniques, and even some manuals that old Howard had written about various trades. "Look at this," said Tyler, flipping through one of the notebooks. "My grandfather didn't just help people, he also taught them trades." Brandon picked up one of the manuals titled Basic Mechanics for Beginners. "He wrote this himself?" he asked, impressed by the level of detail and teaching skill in the material. "It seems so," replied Tyler, finding other manuals on carpentry, residential electrical work, sewing, and even household management. Michael was examining a workbench where there were signs someone had worked recently. "This workshop was used until not long ago," he observed. "Look, there's fresh sawdust here, and some tools still have residue from recent work." Tyler was confused. His grandfather had passed away almost 2 years ago. Who was using the workshop? The answer came in the form of footprints in the dirt around the shed. Someone had been coming there regularly, and the footprints seemed to be from more than one person. "Guys," said Brandon, pointing toward one of the windows, "there's movement out there on the road." Through the window, they saw an old pickup truck approaching. Tyler felt a knot in his stomach. Could it be someone from the family, coming to check what he was doing with the property? The pickup stopped in front of the house, and 3 men Tyler didn't recognize got out. They were simple people dressed in work clothes, and they carried some tools. "Good morning," greeted the oldest of the group as they approached. "Are you relatives of Mr. Howard?" "I'm his grandson," replied Tyler. "Tyler Mitchell. And you?" The man smiled and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Tyler. I'm Sebastian, and these are my sons, Marcus and Fabian. We had an arrangement with your grandfather to use the workshop once a week." "What kind of arrangement?" asked Tyler, curious. Sebastian seemed embarrassed. "Look, son, your grandfather let us use the tools and space to do some extra work. In return, we took care of the workshop maintenance and helped him when he needed some heavier work done. But my grandfather passed away almost 2 years ago," said Tyler. "I know," sighed Sebastian, "but since no one from the family showed up here, we kept coming from time to time to keep everything in order. We weren't doing anything wrong, just preserving what your grandfather built." Marcus, one of the sons, added, "Your grandfather taught us a lot in this workshop. Techniques we use in our work to this day. It was our way of honoring his memory." Tyler looked at Brandon and Michael, who seemed as surprised as he was. "What kind of things did my grandfather teach you?" "A bit of everything," replied Fabian, the younger son. "Woodworking, welding, electrical installations, but the main thing wasn't the techniques, it was his work philosophy." "How so?" asked Brandon, interested. Sebastian smiled. "Your grandfather always said that a job well done wasn't about having the best tools, but about taking pride in what you do and having respect for whoever will use the result. He taught us that every job, no matter how simple, can be done with excellence," Marcus added, "and that when we do a job well, we're helping to build a better society." Tyler was moved. Another facet of his grandfather was being revealed. Besides helping financially and creating support networks, he was also a vocational educator. "Sebastian," said Tyler, "would you like to meet some other people my grandfather also helped?" And so, the circle of people involved in the house project grew even larger. Sebastian and his sons not only agreed to help with the renovation, but also offered to teach their skills to other people who needed to learn a trade. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, the renovation project took on a much larger scope. It wouldn't be just a space for the mutual support group meetings, but also a workshop where people in need could learn practical trades. Mrs. Lucy suggested expanding the scope even further. What if we also included adult literacy classes and financial guidance? My Patricia could give some talks on basic healthcare. The idea excited everyone, but it also brought a concern. A project of this size would need official approval, legal paperwork, and most importantly, much more money than they had available. That's when Tyler remembered something his mother had mentioned years ago, on one of the rare occasions she spoke about Grandpa Howard. My mom once said, "My grandfather had some savings put away, but no one ever knew where," he told the group. "Do you think it's possible he left some money hidden on the property?" Robert Lawson shook his head. "Unlikely, Tyler. Your grandfather always said idle money is useless. If he had a large reserve, he'd surely be using it to help more people." But Sebastian disagreed. "Actually, he once mentioned to me that he had an emergency fund set aside. He said it was for extreme cases, when someone needed very big and urgent help." Michael became interested. "What kind of emergency?" "He never gave details," said Sebastian, "but once he talked about a case where an entire family almost lost their home because the father had an accident and couldn't work for months. He said he used a good part of his savings to save the situation." Tyler decided to conduct a more systematic search of the property. If his grandfather had hidden another secret room, there could be other surprises around the house. Over the following days, he, Robert, and Sebastian examined every inch of the house. They tapped on walls listening for hollow sounds, examined the floorboards behind loose planks, checked attics and basements. It was Fabian, Sebastian's youngest son, who made the decisive discovery. "Uncle Tyler, come see this," he called from the outside area of the house. Fabian had noticed a difference in the ground level in a specific area of the backyard, as if something were buried there. Digging carefully, they found a metal box buried about 1/2 meter below the surface. Inside the box, protected by plastic, they found documents and a thick envelope. The documents included deeds to 3 small urban properties that no one in the family knew existed, and the envelope contained a considerable sum of money, along with a letter addressed to whoever continues the work. With trembling hands, Tyler opened the letter. "If you are reading this, it means you have discovered the true purpose of my life. The properties whose deeds are with this letter were purchased over decades, with money saved penny by penny, with the aim of one day creating a permanent help center for people in need. The money included here is to start this project. It's not much, but it's enough to take the first steps. The properties, if sold, will provide resources to keep the work going for many years. But remember, the value is not in the money or the properties, it's in the lives that can be transformed. Use these resources wisely, always remembering that the goal is not to give fish, but to teach how to fish. If you've made it this far, it's because your heart is in the right place. I trust you'll know how to continue the work I began. With love and hope, Howard Mitchell." Tyler was too emotional to speak. He finally understood the full scope of his grandfather's plan. For decades, he hadn't just helped people individually, but had also been preparing to create something permanent and sustainable. Robert Lawson, looking over the property documents, did some mental calculations. "Tyler, these properties are in neighborhoods that have appreciated greatly in recent years. If sold, they could fund a social project for a long time. Or," suggested Sebastian, "one of them could be used as the project's permanent headquarters, and the others sold to generate operating funds." In the following days, Tyler visited the 3 properties with members of the group. 2 were empty lots in residential neighborhoods, suitable for construction. The third was an old, deactivated auto repair shop, located in a central area of the city with easy access to public transportation. The deactivated shop seemed the obvious choice to everyone. The space already had the necessary basic infrastructure, was well located, and had enough area to accommodate different activities. "It's perfect," said Mrs. Lucy, walking through the spacious area. "Here we can have classrooms, workshops, a meeting space, and even a small auditorium." Michael, examining the facilities, confirmed that only a renovation for suitability would be needed, not a complete rebuild. With the money your grandfather left, plus the sale of one of the other properties, we have enough resources to do an excellent renovation, he calculated. But Tyler wanted to be sure he was making the right decision. He called a special meeting of the group, including all the families who had been helped by his grandfather and who still kept in touch. More than 30 people attended the meeting, held in the shed of the original property. Tyler explained the discovery of his grandfather's informal will and the possibilities that were opening up. Before making any decision, he said, "I need to hear from all of you. After all, this project is to continue the work my grandfather did with each of your families." One of the older women, who had been helped by old Howard in the 1970s, was the first to speak. "My son, your grandfather always said that money only has value when it transforms lives. If he saved these properties and this money, it was exactly for this moment." Patricia, the nurse, raised a practical point, but a project of this size will need professional organization. We can't operate just informally anymore. The group's accountant, who had been quiet until then, spoke up. "She's right. We need to create a legally constituted organization with bylaws, a board, accountability. It's not complicated, but it's necessary." Robert Lawson suggested the organization be named the Howard Mitchell Institute in honor of the work's founder. Everyone agreed emotionally. In the following months, Tyler's life transformed completely. He quit his job as an office assistant to dedicate himself fully to the Institute project. The renovation of the old repair shop began with the volunteer help of dozens of people who had been touched by old Howard's work. Sebastian and his sons coordinated the construction part. Michael handled the electrical work, Robert organized logistics, and Mrs. Lucy took on the overall coordination of activities. Tyler discovered he had organizational skills he didn't know he possessed. He coordinated meetings, negotiated with suppliers, handled the legal aspects of the project, and most importantly, kept his grandfather's work philosophy alive. During the renovation, people from all over the city began to hear about the Howard Mitchell Institute. Former beneficiaries told friends and neighbors about old Howard's work, and many people offered to help as volunteers. A retired teacher volunteered to coordinate literacy classes. A small business owner donated construction materials. A retired nurse proposed creating a program on basic healthcare guidance. The community's response exceeded all expectations, but also brought new challenges. Tyler realized he needed to learn to manage not only financial resources, but also people, expectations, and responsibilities. It was on one such occasion that something happened that would seriously test the project. Brandon, Tyler's older cousin, unexpectedly showed up at the construction site accompanied by a man in a suit who introduced himself as an attorney. "Tyler," said Brandon in a formal tone, "I need to talk to you about this initiative you're running." The attorney, Attorney Harrison, got straight to the point. "Mr. Tyler, I have been hired by the family to verify the legality of the resources being used in this project. There are indications that your grandfather may have diverted money from the family inheritance to fund these activities." Tyler felt his blood run cold. Diverted? This money and these properties are documented in the will he left. "Not in the official will," retorted Attorney Harrison. "What you found was just a letter with no legal value. Technically, all assets not declared in the official will belong to the estate, which must be divided among all heirs." Robert Lawson, who was nearby, approached with concern. "Tyler, what's going on?" "This gentleman is questioning our legal right to use the resources Grandpa left for the project," explained Tyler, trying to remain calm. Brandon crossed his arms. "Tyler, you've always been a bit of a dreamer, but now you've gone too far. You're using money that isn't yours alone to fund these fantasies of being the nation's savior." "They're not fantasies," replied Tyler, feeling his anger rise. "It's the work our grandfather developed for decades, helping hundreds of families." "Work?" laughed Brandon. "Tyler, Grandpa Howard was a stingy old man who barely spoke to his own family. These stories about helping people are your invention to justify what you're doing." It was then that Mrs. Lucy, who had just arrived, approached the group. "Excuse me," she said politely but firmly. "I heard you talking about Mr. Howard." "And you are?" asked Attorney Harrison. "Lucy Thompson. Mr. Howard saved my family from poverty 25 years ago. He taught me a trade, loaned me money to start my business, and followed my progress until I could stand on my own 2 feet. Brandon looked at her with disbelief. "Do you have any proof of that?" Mrs. Lucy smiled and took a photo from her purse pocket. It was an old picture, showing her with her family at the bakery's opening, next to old Howard. "I have this photo, I have the letters he wrote me with advice, and I have my bakery, which now employs 6 people and supports 3 families." Other people who were working on the renovation began to gather, intrigued by the discussion. "And I have my auto repair shop," said Robert Lawson, "which started with tools loaned by Mr. Howard and is now one of the most respected in the area." "I have my nursing diploma," added Patricia, "paid for with money your grandfather loaned me to buy school supplies." Within minutes, more than a dozen people were there, each telling their story of how old Howard had transformed their lives. Attorney Harrison seemed embarrassed, but maintained his legal position. "Look, these stories are very touching, but the legal issue remains. If there are undeclared assets in the official will, they belong to the family estate." "Then we'll settle this legally," said Tyler, surprising everyone with his firmness. "I'll hire a lawyer to represent me, and will prove in court that my grandfather had the right to dispose of his assets as he wished." Brandon seemed irritated by his cousin's resistance. "Tyler, you're making a mistake. Admit you were caught red-handed and return the money to the family. There's still time to avoid a lawsuit." "I'm not returning anything," replied Tyler, feeling a courage he didn't know he possessed. "This money and these properties are the fruit of my grandfather's honest work, and he made his wishes clear. I will honor those wishes to the end." In the following days, the family tension intensified. Tyler's mother, Mrs. Christine, called crying, begging him to yield to the family pressures. "My son, why don't you just take your share of the money and leave this mess behind? You can start your own life with what you're entitled to." "Mom, it's not about the money," Tyler tried to explain. "It's about honoring who Grandpa really was, not who the family thought he was." "But Tyler, you're risking ending up with nothing. If you lose in court, you'll have to return everything and also pay the legal costs." Tyler knew his mother was right about the risks, but something inside him had changed. Learning about his grandfather's true work had awakened a purpose he had never felt before. The lawyer Tyler hired, attorney Mark Davis, was a recent graduate who was interested in the case more for the justice of the cause than for the money he could make from it. "Tyler," explained attorney Mark, "legally your cousin has a point. Assets not declared in the official will belong to the estate, but there are some factors in our favor." "Which ones?" "First, the fact that your grandfather was of sound mind when he wrote the letter and hid the assets. Second, the long period of time over which he developed this social activity, proving it was a sincere conviction, not a last-minute whim." "And is that enough?" "It could be, but we'll need a lot of evidence. Documents, witnesses, proof that your grandfather really helped these people and that this was a lifelong project of his, not a recent invention." It was then that Tyler had an idea. He remembered that in the secret room there were hundreds of letters, organized by decades. If they could prove that his grandfather's social work was systematic and long-lasting, they might have a chance in court. In the following days, Tyler, Mrs. Lucy, Robert, and several others dedicated themselves to organizing all the evidence of old Howard's work. They photographed every letter, organized them chronologically, identified the beneficiary families who could still testify as witnesses. The result was impressive. They managed to document over 40 years of systematic social activity involving hundreds of families and thousands of people directly or indirectly benefited. Attorney Mark was impressed with the volume of evidence. "With this material, we can argue that the savings and properties in question were accumulated specifically to fund this social activity, constituting a kind of informal foundation created by your grandfather." The trial date was set for 2 months later. During this period, Tyler had to continue running the Institute project with limited resources, as the money was legally frozen until the final decision. But the community that had formed around the project mobilized in an impressive way. Local small business owners offered donations, Beneficiary families contributed what they could, and volunteers worked for free to keep the renovation moving forward. The story even reached the local press. A reporter from the city newspaper wrote an article titled "The Grandson Who Discovered His Grandfather's Secret," covering the entire case and drawing attention to the social work being carried out. The article's impact was astonishing. Dozens of people who had been helped by Old Howard and had lost contact with the group reached out to Tyler, offering testimonies and support. One of them was particularly moving. Mrs. Regina, a woman in her 70s, called in tears. "My dear, I read the newspaper article and couldn't stay silent. Your grandfather saved my life 40 years ago, when I had tuberculosis and no money for treatment." Mrs. Regina recounted that Old Howard not only paid for her medication, but also cared for her young children during the months she was hospitalized, and even helped her get a job after she recovered. "He did all of this in secret," she said. "Not even my own children know to this day that it was your grandfather who helped us. He asked me not to tell anyone, to preserve my dignity." Stories like this multiplied in the following weeks. Tyler discovered that his grandfather had helped far more people than he had imagined, and that many of them had kept the secret for decades, respecting his request. The discovery of these new witnesses significantly strengthened the legal case, but also brought an emotional dimension that Tyler hadn't expected. He was discovering not just what his grandfather did, but especially how he did it, always preserving the dignity of those he helped, never boasting, never expecting public recognition. The week before the trial, Brandon sought out Tyler for one last attempt at a settlement. "Tyler, let's stop this nonsense. You split the money with the family, keep your share, and everyone wins. Why insist on this stubbornness?" "It's not stubbornness, Brandon. It's principle." "Principle? What principle is that?" Tyler looked at his cousin with a serenity that surprised him. "The principle that there are things more important than money. Grandpa spent his whole life proving that, helping people when he could have been amassing a fortune for the family." "So what? What does the family have to do with the people he helped?" "It has to do with the kind of person he was and the kind of grandson I want to be." Brandon shook his head, frustrated. "You'll regret this, Tyler. You'll lose everything and still be in debt." "Maybe," Tyler admitted, "but at least I'll lose while defending something I believe in." The day of the trial arrived with a surprise. The courtroom was packed. Besides the families directly involved in the case, dozens of people who had been helped by Old Howard showed up to watch the trial. Mrs. Lucy was nervous. "Tyler, my dear, so many people. Will everything turn out all right?" "It will, Mrs. Lucy. Regardless of the legal outcome, it already has. We discovered who Grandpa really was, and no one can take that away from us." The judge, Judge Henry Fields, was a middle-aged man, serious but with a kind gaze. He first heard the arguments from Attorney Harrison representing the family. "Your Honor, the case is simple. The deceased left an official will distributing his known assets among the legitimate heirs. Subsequently, undeclared assets were discovered, which by law belong to the estate, and must be divided equally among all heirs." "And the letter found by the defendant?" asked the judge. "The letter has no legal value, Your Honor. It is merely the expression of a person's wishes regarding assets that legally were not solely theirs, but belonged to the entire family." Attorney Mark, defending Tyler, presented a different argument. "Your Honor, what we are discussing here is not merely a matter of assets, but the recognition of a life's work. Mr. Howard Mitchell dedicated over 40 years of his life to systematic and organized social work, funded with his own resources specifically saved for this purpose." The attorney then presented all the evidence collected, the letters organized chronologically, photographs, written testimonies, and requested that some witnesses be heard. The first witness was Robert Lawson. With a firm voice, he told his story and explained how Old Howard had not only helped him financially, but had educated him to become a responsible entrepreneur. "Mr. Howard didn't give handouts," said Robert. "He invested in people. He taught, followed up, demanded results. It was serious, professional work." Mrs. Lucy was the second witness. She brought photos of the evolution of her bakery over the years, showing how it had grown from a counter in her own home to a business that employed several people. "He changed not only my life but the lives of everyone who works with me today," she said, moved. "If it weren't for Mr. Howard, I would be a destitute widow depending on others' charity. Today I am a businesswoman who can help other people." The third witness was Patricia, the nurse. She explained how the investment in her education had multiplied into benefits for hundreds of patients she cared for at the hospital. "Mr. Howard always said that education was the best investment because it multiplied infinitely," she recounted. "Each person who learns something can teach others, creating an endless chain." The judge heard 6 more witnesses, each telling a similar story of life transformation through the guided and educational help of old Howard. Attorney Harrison, representing the family, tried to discredit the testimonies. "Your Honor, no one is questioning the deceased's good intentions, but good intentions don't change the law. The undeclared assets belong to the estate." It was then that Attorney Mark Davis presented his main argument. "Your Honor, there is an important legal precedent. When a person designates assets specifically for philanthropic purposes, even informally, and it can be proven that this was a lasting and systematized conviction, the court has recognized the validity of this designation." The attorney cited 3 similar cases where the court had recognized informal wills for social purposes, especially when there was evidence that it was a life project, not an impulsive decision. The judge requested a recess to analyze the documentation and the cited precedents. During this interval, which lasted almost an hour, the hall remained tense. Tyler was surprisingly calm. He looked around and saw dozens of people whose lives had been transformed by his grandfather's work. Regardless of the court's decision, that transformation had already happened and would continue to happen. When the judge returned, the silence in the hall was absolute. "Analyzing the case presented," began Judge Henry Fields, "I find myself before a legally complex situation, but a humanely very clear one." He flipped through some papers before continuing. "On one hand, it is true that assets undeclared in an official will belong in principle to the estate. On the other hand, the evidence presented unequivocally demonstrates that the deceased Howard Mitchell developed over more than 4 decades a systematic, organized, and effective social work." The judge paused, looking at the people present in the hall. The hundreds of letters presented, the witnesses' testimonies, and especially the concrete results of this work in terms of transformed lives, constitute irrefutable proof that this was a genuine and lasting life project. Tyler felt his heart race. Considering further that the funds in question were specifically accumulated to finance the continuation of this work, as clearly expressed in the letter found by the plaintiff, and considering the legal precedents cited by the defense, I rule in favor of the validity of the informal allocation of assets for social purposes. The courtroom erupted in applause and tears of joy. Tyler felt his legs go weak and had to lean on the table. This means the funds can be used to continue the social work initiated by the deceased under the coordination of the Howard Mitchell Institute, provided it is properly registered and supervised by the competent authorities. Attorney Harold banged the gavel, adjourning the session. Brandon and Attorney Harrison left the courtroom visibly displeased, but Tyler barely had time to process the victory. He was immediately surrounded by dozens of people wanting to hug and congratulate him. "We did it, my boy," cried Mrs. Lucy, giving him a tight hug. "Your grandfather would be proud." "The fight is only just beginning," said Tyler, moved but already thinking of the next steps. "Now we have to prove we deserve this trust." In the following months, the Howard Mitchell Institute was officially registered as a non-profit social organization. The renovation of the old workshop was completed, creating a spacious and functional area with classrooms, vocational workshops, a library, a small auditorium, and a meeting space. The first class of students consisted of 20 people, 10 in adult literacy, 5 in basic mechanics, and 5 in elementary computer skills. They were all people referred by the original group of families helped by old Howard, following the same criteria he used, people in genuine difficulty, but with a genuine willingness to work and learn. Tyler discovered he was a natural administrator. He organized class schedules, created student monitoring systems, established partnerships with local companies for internships and jobs, and, most importantly, kept alive the spirit of dignity and respect that characterized his grandfather's work. Sebastian and his sons became the instructors for the practical workshops. Mrs. Lucy coordinated a women's entrepreneurship course. Patricia gave regular talks on healthcare. Robert Lawson taught automotive mechanics and small business management. After 6 months of operation, the institute already had concrete results. 15 of the 20 students from the first class had secured employment or significantly improved their income. Even more importantly, 3 of them volunteered to teach what they had learned to a new class. "It's exactly as Grandpa used to say," Tyler remarked during an evaluation meeting. "Knowledge multiplies when it is shared." The positive impact of the work attracted attention from other organizations. The Riverside City Council offered a partnership to expand the adult literacy program. A local university proposed that education students complete internships at the institute. Small business owners began approaching the institute to recruit employees. But the most moving moment for Tyler was when Mrs. Regina, the lady his grandfather had helped 40 years earlier, appeared at the institute with a proposal. "My son, I have kept all these years the money your grandfather lent me for my tuberculosis treatment. I could never repay it because he said it was a gift, but my heart has always felt indebted." She handed Tyler an envelope. "I want this money to be used to help others, as he helped me. It is my way of giving back." Tyler opened the envelope and found a sum that, adjusted for 4 decades of inflation, represented a considerable amount. "Mrs. Regina, you owe nothing. My grandfather considered your recovery as sufficient payment." "I know," she smiled, "but now I want to be part of this chain of kindness. I want my grandchildren to see that gratitude should be passed forward." Cases like Mrs. Regina's multiplied. People who had been helped by old Howard decades ago began to appear, offering contributions, volunteer work, or simply their stories as inspiration for the new beneficiaries. 1 year after the court decision, the institute was already serving over 100 people in various programs: adult literacy, vocational courses, financial guidance, entrepreneurship, and even a conflict mediation program that Tyler had created, inspired by one of his grandfather's letters. Tyler's family, who had initially opposed the project, began to show a quiet pride in the results achieved. His mother, Mrs. Christine, visited the institute for the first time on its 1-year anniversary. "My son," she said, moved, walking through the rooms where dozens of people studied and worked. "I never understood my father, but now I'm starting to understand you." "What do you mean?" "You have his eyes, Tyler. The same way of looking at people and seeing possibilities where others see only problems. Even Brandon, the cousin who had filed the lawsuit, showed up for a visit. He didn't apologize, but his presence there was already an implicit acknowledgement that he was wrong. "This place is getting big," he commented, observing the institute's activity. "And it's going to get even bigger," replied Tyler. "Grandpa planted a seed that will keep growing for generations." During the 2nd year of operation, the institute faced its first major challenge. The demand for courses had grown so much that the space was insufficient, but the financial resources didn't allow for a significant expansion. That's when Tyler remembered the other 2 properties his grandfather had left. Until then, they had been rented out to generate income for the institute, but perhaps it was time to think of a different use. At a meeting of the institute's board, formed by the original members of the Mutual Support Group, Tyler presented a bold proposal. "What if we created branches of the institute in other neighborhoods? We could build small units on the other properties, each specializing in a different area." The idea excited everyone, but also brought concerns about management capacity. "Tyler," pondered Mrs. Lucy, "managing one institute is already complex. 3 institutes would be 3 times as difficult." "Not 3 institutes," explained Tyler. 3 branches of the same institute, each with a specialization. The central branch would continue with literacy and general administration. One branch could specialize in technical workshops, and another in women's entrepreneurship. Robert Lawson liked the idea. "It's a good strategy." Each branch would serve a region of the city, making it easier for people to access. The proposal was approved unanimously, and the expansion began in the 3rd year of operation. The technical workshop branch was built on one of the properties, offering courses in mechanics, electrical work, and carpentry, with more sophisticated equipment. The women's entrepreneurship branch was set up on the other property, with specific rooms for sewing, cooking, and crafts. The strategy worked better than expected. Each branch developed its own personality and community, but maintained the philosophy and methods of the Central Institute. Sebastian took over coordination of the technical branch, applying all his decades of experience working with Old Howard. Mrs. Lucy became responsible for the women's branch, where her experience as a successful businesswoman inspired the women who wanted to start their own businesses. By the 4th year, the Institute had already graduated over 500 students, about 80% of whom had significantly improved their professional and financial situations. Even more importantly, many former students had become volunteer teachers, multiplying the reach of the work. It was during this period that something happened that deeply moved Tyler. One of the Institute's first students, a woman named Sandra, who had learned computer skills and gotten a job at an accounting firm, approached him with a proposal. "Tyler, I want to create a scholarship fund for the children of people who went through the Institute. My kids managed to get into a private university with partial scholarships, but I still have to pay a portion. I thought other families must be in the same situation." Sandra's idea gave birth to the Future program, which offered supplemental scholarships for the children of Institute beneficiaries who were able to enter higher education. The program started small, helping 5 students, but grew quickly as former students and Institute partners began contributing regularly. Patricia, who had become one of the Institute's general coordinators, was put in charge of the program. "It's moving to see how your grandfather's work continues to multiply," she said to Tyler. "Now we're not only transforming the life of one generation, but ensuring a better future for the next one." In the 5th year of operation, the Howard Mitchell Institute received an unexpected proposal. The State Department of Social Services wanted to replicate the Institute's model in other cities, creating a statewide network of professional training centers based on the philosophy of teaching to fish. The proposal was tempting from a financial and reach standpoint, but Tyler had concerns about maintaining the quality and values of the work on such a large scale. "Mrs. Lucy," he said during a meeting, "I'm afraid that by growing too much, we might lose what's most important in our work: the personalized service, the individual follow-up, the respect for each person's dignity." "My son, your grandfather faced the same dilemma," she replied wisely. "When his work grew too big for one person, he created our mutual support network. Perhaps it's time to take the next step." After months of negotiation, a partnership was established where the Institute would provide consulting and training for the creation of similar centers in other cities, but each center would maintain its own autonomy and identity. Tyler created a coordinator training program where people interested in replicating the work in their cities would spend 3 months in intensive training at the Institute's hubs, learning not just the techniques, but especially the philosophy and values that guided the work. The first replicated center was inaugurated in Springfield, coordinated by a former Institute student who had moved there. The second was in Oceanside, run by a couple who had learned about the work through relatives who were beneficiaries. Each new inauguration moved Tyler, but also made him reflect on the legacy he was building. "Sometimes I get the feeling that Grandpa planned all this from the beginning," he commented to Robert Lawson during a visit to the cemetery where Old Howard was buried. "Maybe he did plan it," replied Robert. "He always said the best seeds were the ones that sprouted long after they were planted." In the 6th year, the Institute received an honor none of them expected. The Riverside City Council passed a law creating Municipal Active Solidarity Day in honor of the work developed by Old Howard and continued by the Institute. The award ceremony was held in the City Council's main auditorium, packed with officials, Institute partners, alumni, and their families. "Mr. Tyler Mitchell," said the mayor during the ceremony, "by continuing your grandfather's work, you have shown that a true legacy is not measured in material possessions, but in the good we do for our fellow human beings." Tyler went up on stage to receive the honor, but before speaking, he asked all the people who had been helped by his grandfather's work to stand up. More than half of the auditorium rose to their feet. "This honor is not mine," said Tyler, moved. It belongs to all these people who had the courage to start over, to learn, to transform themselves. And most of all, it belongs to my grandfather, Howard Mitchell, who planted the seeds of everything we are seeing today." He paused, looking at the sea of emotional faces. "My grandfather always said that money only has value when it circulates and does good. Today I can say that kindness works the same way. It only has value when it circulates, when it is passed on, when it multiplies." The audience rose in applause that lasted several minutes. After the ceremony, Tyler was approached by a young journalist who wanted to write a book about the Institute's history. "Mr. Tyler, what do you think your grandfather would make of all this?" Tyler smiled, remembering the words he had found in the first letter he read in the secret room. "I think he would say the seed has become a tree, and now it's time to harvest the fruit to plant new seeds." In the 7th year, something happened that Tyler did not expect. Brandon, his cousin who had filed the lawsuit, sought him out for a private conversation. "Tyler, I need to apologize to you," he said, clearly embarrassed. "I was wrong about everything, about Grandpa, about you, about what you all are doing." "Brandon, that's in the past. You don't need to worry about that." "Yes, I do. And I need to do something to make up for it. I want to make a donation to the Institute, a large donation." Tyler was surprised. "How so?" "My company had exceptional profits this year. I want to donate a significant portion to the Institute. Let's say it's my way of honoring Grandpa's memory, even if it's late." Brandon's donation allowed for a significant expansion of the Institute, including the creation of a permanent fund that would guarantee long-term financial sustainability. But for Tyler, more important than the donation was the family reconciliation. Brandon began occasionally participating in the Institute's activities, and for the first time in decades, the Mitchell family was united around something positive and constructive. "You know, Tyler," Brandon said during one of these visits, "I always thought Grandpa didn't like the family because he spent little time with us. Now I understand he spent little time with us because he was busy taking care of many other families." In the 8th year, the Institute faced an unexpected crisis. A change in federal legislation complicated the legal situation for social organizations, creating bureaucratic requirements that threatened the operations of hundreds of entities across the country. Tyler had to spend months dealing with lawyers, accountants, and bureaucrats to bring the Institute into compliance with the new rules. For several weeks he considered the possibility that all the work could be halted by technicalities. "Mrs. Lucy, sometimes I think Grandpa had it easier, working informally without all this bureaucracy," he vented during one of the most tense board meetings. "My dear, your grandfather faced difficulties too. The difference is that his difficulties were different. But he never gave up, and we are not going to give up either." The bureaucratic crisis was eventually overcome, but it left an important lesson: the need for a more robust and professional administrative structure. Tyler hired an experienced administrator and created an in-house legal department, ensuring the Institute was always in compliance with all legal requirements. The 9th year brought a special achievement. The Institute was selected by the Department of Education as one of the 10 best professional education practices in the country, receiving a national award in Washington. Tyler traveled to the federal capital accompanied by Mrs. Lucy, Robert Lawson, and Sebastian to receive the award. For all of them who had started the work as something small and local, receiving national recognition was almost surreal. "Your grandfather would be proud," said Mrs. Lucy during the ceremony in Washington. "He always said that well-done work would one day be recognized." The award brought national visibility to the Institute. Journalists from all over the country visited Riverside to learn about the work, and several cities requested consultancy to replicate the model. But it also brought challenges. With so much attention came pressures for the Institute to grow faster, serve more people, expand to more cities. Tyler resisted these pressures, always remembering his grandfather's teachings about quality versus quantity. "I'd rather help 100 people very well than 1,000 people poorly helped," he would say in interviews. In the 10th year of operation, the Institute organized a major celebration. Over 1,000 people attended the event, held at a city convention center. It had been 10 years of transformation, not only for the people served, but for the entire surrounding community. The institute had become a national reference, but maintained its local roots and original values. During the celebration, Tyler gave a speech that summarized everything they had built. 10 years ago, I was a lost young man, without purpose, trying to find my place in the world. When I inherited my grandfather's house, I thought I was just getting an old, run-down property. He paused, looking at the crowd, listening in absolute silence. In fact, I had inherited something much more valuable, a legacy of kindness, a network of extraordinary people, and most importantly, a life purpose that gives meaning to each day. Today, 10 years later, I can say that my grandfather's abandoned house was not empty. It was full of love, hope, possibilities. It was full of the future we are living today. And most importantly, everything we have built so far is just the beginning. Every person who goes through the Institute carries with them the ability to transform other lives, creating an endless chain of transformation and hope. The audience rose in applause that lasted over 10 minutes. Tyler looked at Mrs. Lucy, at Robert, at Sebastian, at all those people who had trusted the dream of a lost young man and the wisdom of an old man that his own family didn't understand. "Grandpa," he murmured softly, looking at the sky, "I think we did it. I think the seed has become a forest." End of story. So, what did you think of this story of overcoming and discovery? Tyler managed to honor his grandfather's legacy and transform an apparently worthless inheritance into a source of transformation for hundreds of lives. Tell us in the comments, do you believe that small acts of kindness can really change the world? Have you experienced a similar situation in your family? Leave your like if the story moved you and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.